Congressional Republicans are united in opposition to Joe Biden's $2 trillion infrastructure bill. Joining us now, Senator Roy Blunt, a member of the GOP Senator leadership. Senator, welcome back.
Chris, great to be with you today.
So you just heard my conversation with Brian Deese, and here was President Biden this week selling his plan. Take a look.
It's not a plan that tinkers around the edges. It's a once-in-a-generation investment in America, unlike anything we've seen or done since we built the interstate highway system and the space race decades ago.
President Trump talked about an infrastructure program for years of his presidency, even though he never actually offered one. Doesn't the country need a significant infrastructure upgrade?
Oh, absolutely. You know, location, geography, one of our great advantages. We need that. It was sort of the great white whale of the last 10 years, frankly. Neither President Obama or President Trump could seem to get this moving in the right direction. I think there's an easy win here for the White House if they would take that win, which is make this an infrastructure package, which is about 30%. Even if you stretch the definition of infrastructure some, it's about 30% of the $2.25 trillion they're talking about spending. My advice to the White House has been take that bipartisan win, do this in a more traditional infrastructure way, and then if you want to force the rest of the package on Republicans in the Congress and the country, you could certainly do that. You'd still have all the tools available for what is clearly going to turn out to be another purely partisan exercise. I think it's a big mistake for the administration. They know I think it's a mistake, and I also think it would be an easy victory if we go back and look at roads and bridges and ports and airports and maybe even underground water systems and broadband. You'd still be talking about less than 30% of this entire package, and it's a easily doable 30%, I think, Chris.
So, Senator, are you saying that you and perhaps some of your colleagues in the Republican Party up on Capitol Hill would support, I'm just quickly doing the math here, $700–800 billion in infrastructure?
Well, I think 30% is about $615 or so billion. I think you can do that, and with some innovative things like looking at how we're going to deal with the electric vehicle use of the highway system, what we can do with public-private partnerships. In past Congresses, Senator Bennett, a Democrat from Colorado, and I have introduced that kind of legislation, as Senator Warner from Virginia and I have, where you could get the traditional funding sources and add a few things to them and have a real infrastructure package. We need that. It will have huge economic impact. I thought it was interesting, this whole concept. Well, we also need an infrastructure of care. Obviously, Democrats have figured out that infrastructure is something we need and something that's popular, and so they're trying to take 70% of this bill and call it infrastructure in a new way than we've ever talked about infrastructure before, and that means you're looking at another partisan package, just like we had with COVID, which, by the way, only a fairly small percentage of that package really dealt with COVID. It was income to states, it was lots of things, but not what the much-needed title of the bill said they wanted to do.
Well, okay, so let's say it's $600–700 billion. One of the questions they're asking at the White House, because Republicans have come out against raising the corporate tax rate, how would you pay for it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I just answered that. You know, we've traditionally played for infrastructure and some kind of reasonable user structure. Everybody's very familiar with the gasoline tax. As we have more electric vehicles, we're going to have to figure out some way that those electric vehicles pay their fair share. We may even have to figure out a different way that driverless vehicles pay for the increased kind of monitoring that needs to happen with the highway system itself you have with that. And then You can look again at private-public partnerships, at some version of an infrastructure bank where you take a federal investment and leverage it pretty dynamically. All of those things are possible, plus the basis you have in the current gas tax structure that produces $300 or so billion in that time period. And I think it's very doable. Whatever it would be a true bipartisan discussion, as opposed to asking every Republican in the Senate who was there in 2017 to change their mind on a tax package that, frankly, I think had a lot to do with that 3.5% unemployment rate we had a year ago when COVID started.
But let me push back on what I think would be the White House argument. They would say, look, we're talking about raising the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28%. When President Trump came in, it was 35%. So it's still a tax cut from where it was in 2017. And instead, Senator Blunt and the Republicans are saying, instead of raising taxes for big corporations, well, let's tell the average person, the working class person, you're going to have to pay more for taxes. If you drive more on the road, you're going to have to pay more in a mileage fee, or you're going to have to pay more in tolls. They're going to say they're protecting the fat cats and putting it on the backs of the working class.
Well, I think people have always accepted the user tax concept of the transportation system. And on the tax bill itself, the proof we're in the numbers. We saw the economy growing in a dynamic and dramatic way. We saw businesses thinking about how they could restructure themselves back into American corporations with a more strong basis in this country and the supply chain. All those things were happening. We had a 3.5% unemployment rate as we were a couple of years into that tax package. And remember, the corporate rate we did just got us in the mid-level of the corporate rate for the countries around the world. If we went back to 28%, we'd be, I think, number 2 in the world in corporate taxes. Other countries saw the success we were having, and many other countries that we compete with reduced their corporate rate to try to keep their jobs at home rather than seeing those jobs come to the United States of America.
Senator, I got less than 2 minutes left. I want to squeeze one more question in. I haven't heard you say it today, but some of your colleagues in the Republican Party are complaining about this is going to explode debt, this is going to explode deficits. And I want to put up what the Republican record is on those. During the Trump presidency, even before the pandemic, the national debt increased by more than $3 trillion. And in 2017, every Republican in the Senate, including you, voted for the big Trump tax cuts, which cut revenue by almost $1.5 trillion. So I guess the question is, when I hear, for instance, Mitch McConnell talking now about, well, debt and deficits, hasn't the Republican Party, haven't you lost your credibility on this issue?
Well, I don't think anybody has a very good record for the last decade on this. I think the deficit under the Obama years and the Trump years are very similar. The tax cuts, however, in real revenue produced more revenue. In static revenue, they wouldn't, because you couldn't anticipate the kind of growth we had. And remember, after the pandemic did occur, we did 5, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 bipartisan bills trying to be sure we stabilize this economy so we'd have a stable economy that would pay that debt off as we came out of COVID. Now we've seen one incredibly partisan bill from the new administration, followed by what it appears to will be another incredibly partisan bill. You can't spread that blame around if you decide you're going to do it all by yourself.
Well, yes, I suppose that's true. I just want to make it clear. When I talked about the increase in debt during the Trump years, I did it purposely before the pandemic started. Senator Blunt, thank you. Thanks for coming in this Easter Sunday. Always good to talk with you, sir.